Today we're talking about environment. It doesn't matter where you are. So let's take a walk to the Geek Shop.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Geek Shop. I'm Chetan, and with me again is...
Chris, I'm back.
He's back. Now, before we get into our episode, Chris, are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine. As some of you may have heard, I live in a place that had an earthquake recently. Fortunately, I was actually out of town during the earthquake, and surprisingly, none of my all my toys are okay, which is the most important thing, right?
Wait. You didn't even mention your wife. You mentioned your toys and everything else.
Well, she doesn't listen to this, so it doesn't matter.
Okay. Your toys and comics are okay. That's the main part.
Exactly. My collection of TikTok Tom zines are still in okay, so you know.
Okay, that's great to hear.
So yeah, everybody's okay, including friends and family. So it's all good. But
that's great to hear. I mean, that was my first, first thing when I heard about the earthquake. I'm going, that's where Chris is.
Yeah. And if anybody decides they want to donate to a charity, I know a lot of people in other parts of this country and other countries right now are suffering. So if you know a good charity that's helping those people out, I know we don't plug charities on this very much, but it's a good cause, and I know that there are a lot of people having a hard time right now in some of the areas that are affected.
Well, let's leave a link in the description, and anyone who wishes to do so, please do that. That'll be great.
Cool. So let's get to this. What's that? Am I supposed to introduce the topic, or are you going to introduce the topic today?
Sure, introduce the topic.
So I thought we could talk about, because this is weird, we've talked about character development, but we've sort of always neglected to talk about one of the most important characters in both of our stories, and that's the setting. I think every author and writer will say setting is super important to your
it
story.
is, yeah.
So
very, very important, because that brings the story down to earth.
It does.
It makes it more personal.
Exactly. Or it takes it away from earth and makes it more surreal.
Oh, no. Yes, it makes it, but that setting, not down to earth, makes it more, what do you call it, homey, universal, you could relate to.
And interestingly enough, from like an artist-writer standpoint, it's also one of the biggest pains, because to be honest, I think a lot of us are okay with drawing backgrounds, but not really. But often setting is part of your background, and that's sort of something that, I think we've talked about it in past, where we talk about how to like draw fewer backgrounds in our stories and just draw the cool characters.
Yes.
And so, but setting is sort of like the opposite of that, where we're talking about how do we ground our stuff instead of just making it in a white void? How do we make it into a real place? And so I think we'll talk a bit about that too. But let's start with. I think we should start with TikTok Tom. You talked a little bit about this just before we recorded, but I sort of mistakenly thought, I was like, was it Toronto? But it seems like Toronto, but it's not really Toronto.
It is, but I named it Nexus City in the full-size book when I was doing it. And, I mean, it's Toronto, but I just wanted to call it a different name.
Yeah. And it's even if you look at it now, I think if you look at the current stories, particularly us old-timers working on it, it's not Toronto today. It's Toronto from like the 90s and 80s.
Oh, definitely. When when you walked around this, like, let's say anyone who's from the Toronto or GTA area or who's been to Toronto would know, like, places like Queen Street and Bloor Street and things like that, when they had cool shops and stuff. That's the vibe we're going for.
For sure. And occasionally I do see props and window fronts from specifically Queen West during the 1980s and 90s of Toronto. Like, you see it there for sure.
Well, because that's, again, that's the, what do you call it, era we grew up in.
Yeah.
Because, we used to walk around, this is pre-computer, I mean, computers are around, but pre-internet age, where, you walked around, looked around, you were younger, you did that, and nothing against my kids, but, they're sitting around looking at their iPads, where we used to, a lot of us used to hang around coffee shops. We used to hang around, meet at, hey, like, let's meet at this comic shop or let's meet at this CD shop.
Yeah.
And that used to be our hangout.
I think it's also worth noting that OCAD, the school you went to, is like 2 blocks away from Queen West.
That's it. Yes.
So like you got
So that helped. That helped a lot.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, I would say like the best hangout area for OCAD was like Queen West in Toronto.
Oh yeah, and the street gives not the street, but the whole urban environment makes a great setting.
It does. It does. And I mean, I get to the point where I always think Stinky's Box is that place where Sugar Mountain started, where they used to sell between Silver
Oh
Snail.
yeah, because because they had that alleyway.
Yeah. So Silver Snail,
Yes.
it's no longer there. I don't know if they moved it, if they're closed down. I don't know.
No, they moved it down further down. They moved it two locations, but they're not in that same area. I don't even honestly. I haven't even been in that area in years, so I don't even know what took over in that place.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Like, I don't know either. I haven't lived there in a few years, so. But there used to be this little alley. Silver Snail was like probably one of the best comic book shops. I would say in Canada, but I've even heard that some people have said it used to be one of the better comic book shops in North America.
Oh, it was great, and the building was great. And I remember, Silver Snail was at the bottom, and on top of it was. This is when I was a teenager. Vortex Comics was above them.
Yep. Eventually, Silver Snail, I think, took over the upstairs too.
No. This was the. Was it up? Yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. No, was it? Was it the same? Maybe. I don't remember if Silver Snail had 2 floors or did that building have 2 floors or 3 floors?
I think it had two. It had 2 floors, but then I think Silver Snail took over the 2nd floor. But then there's a 3rd floor, but that was just an office place. Like, I'd been there once and twice. And then but I think Vortex was there before, and then Silver Snail took it over eventually, and like near the end of the.
Well, I just remember as a teenager. I mean, finding Vortex Comics and stuff, and their comics are good because they were like non-traditional mainstream comics, and they had amazing artists like Jimmy Hernandez, Dean Motter, Seth. Who else? Names are going by me right now, but they had some great artists, and I remember looking at the book. Then when you look inside the cover and go, "Hey, this is published in Toronto, and the studios are in Toronto."
Yeah, for sure. And we should also mention. I mean, we're talking about Stinky's Box there's an alleyway next to this comic book shop, which had a few businesses sort of just spring up in the alleyway. And so I think Stinky's.
I remember there used to be like a lot of selling fresh juices and carts and stuff like that. So Stinky would fit in perfectly in that alley.
Exactly. It was actually one of the cleanest alleyways in that area, but it was like.
Yes, actually, yeah.
But that's not saying much because some of the alleyways in that area were awful. But
again, in that alley, if I remember, there's no graffiti or anything.
No, I think it was fairly well. I think because of Silver Snail. Because everybody kind of respected that place. There was people didn't cause problems there because
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to deface it because that's Silver Snail, and the last thing you'd want to do is get banned from Silver Snail. So it's it totally makes sense. But that's and ironically, I think the Geek Shop is sort of Silver Snail.
Actually, I didn't even think about that. That actually, yes, that makes sense now because I didn't even think about it. But you're right. The alley and the comic shop would fit the Silver Snail area perfectly.
Yeah, so I always sort of thought, I think the inside of the Geek Shop is also a little bit beguiling.
Yes.
Which was, another comic book shop where they did indie stuff in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
So, so I get that vibe from TikTok Tom of the city, Toronto, 1980s, 1990s. It's definitely that vibe, and the cool thing is it hasn't really evolved. I mean, that's a cool thing. It's not it hasn't modernized. You still, every time I see TikTok Tom stories, I sort of get a bit of a vibe of that's still Toronto from the 80s and 90s.
Well, that's what but that's what I remember, and that's what I want to, not to say hold on to, but you know what, that's what I want to show because, and hate to say it. I mean, as it is, comic book stores are a dying breed, also.
Yeah.
So, but I want to show like I said, Stinky and the comic book shop right beside him, and Jack shopping at the comic book shop, and hanging around inside. And what made me put the comic shop there was not even thinking about Silver Snail. I was thinking about when I was talking to Brian from Worlds Collide in Oshawa. And it's a nifty, cool comic shop that reminds me of the old days.
Yeah.
Where you go into the comic shop and these guys were actually, you know, you don't see Funko toys in the comic shop. You see comic books.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't see any collectible rare issues or whatever. You have guys who are working there who actually read comics.
Yeah, it's true, and who care about comics.
That's it. And that's what I was thinking about when I put the Geek Shop in, was thinking, you know what? As an inspiration, I used Worlds Collide.
That's true. And for the coffee shop, is it that place that's at the corner of Queen and Spadina?
Queen and Spadina, what's that?
It used to,
shop? Oh, yes.
It was like the opposite corner of the McDonald's. There used to be a coffee shop there.
Yes,
and
coffee shop there.
I feel like a lot of people, even if it's not specifically based on the inside of that comic book shop, I think I've seen a few shots of like exterior shots of that coffee shop, and it always seems to look like that place.
Subconsciously, I'm sure I used Snail and that coffee shop as references, but yes, I remember. Yes, I do remember that coffee shop.
I don't think I ever went in there because I think it was always overpriced, but.
Yeah, I think I've been there once. And I don't remember the name. If anyone remembers name, please leave it in the comments down here.
Yeah.
I mean, we could Google it, but we're too lazy.
I don't even know if it's still there, so it would be like Google like history of coffee shops on Queen Street, and that would be like.
Yes.
So who knows? But I think probably most coffee shops. We used to go to Second Cup a lot.
Yeah, Second Cup used to be our hangout. Okay, so coffee shops. I think that's a 90s thing, because we used to walk around and, like I said, again, we didn't have smartphones. We didn't have internet. We didn't have this. So we hung around with friends. I know you, Tom, Patrick, Alan, all of us used to, they knew which coffee shop we would be at.
Yeah.
And I remember Alan especially, because Alan lived not too far from where we worked. And after work, randomly he'd just come in there and go, I know you guys are here.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It was like, always where to find us.
It's either that or the comic book store.
Yep.
He knew we would be at one or the other place.
Although comic book stores we generally did at lunchtime.
Yes, we did. Yes, generally, yeah.
So it'd be like comics at lunch, coffee after work.
And here's the worst part, which I'm thinking about is, we went to coffee shops, we went to comic shops. Most other people would go to like pubs or bars.
Yeah, we did definitely. I remember it got to a point when also we have those little stamp cards for coffees, and they just fill up because A, they wouldn't care, and B, we would just be drinking so much coffee it wouldn't matter.
I just remember the Second Cup, the guy who knew us there. Half the time we get coffee, like if we because we were there 2-3 times a day.
Yeah.
And he'd just like, yeah, take it, don't worry about it.
Yep. Eventually it's like, you guys buy enough, so every once in a while I'm just giving you guys free coffee.
And he wouldn't care if we sat there for like 4 hours talking away.
Yeah. It's true. So yeah, but in TikTok, Tom, so you have the coffee shop, which I mean is basically, our growing up. You have the comic shop, and you have the city. Is there any other buildings or institutions that you can think of?
Not offhand. No, not offhand. No, one of the stories I was doing, and unfortunately I didn't finish it. I was gonna do a setting where Jack lived. It was an apartment building and stuff. And when I drew it out, I'll put a reference shot here. When I drew it out, I wanted, again, it's the old style apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And I remember, and this goes back to like downtown Toronto buildings, where, you had the storefront at the bottom, then on top you had the apartments.
Yep.
And that's what I had the setting for Jack. And I drew out 2 stories. again, it was rough ideas where I drew them out, and that's the idea I had in mind.
Yeah, I guess you don't really see where they live much in TikTok Tom at all. Like, does Tom even have a home?
Most stories you don't see their home life.
Yeah, that might be an interesting future story.
And one thing, and that's another also thing is you don't know what they do during their daytime. Do they have jobs?
Yeah, seriously. Although I figure Tom's busy traveling through time. He doesn't need a job. So.
But then again, actually, Iggy works for Kill for You, and I have shown since the early stories we have shown the Kill for You building.
Okay, is that like a big
Which is like a
corporation?
Yeah, that's it. I think when I was thinking about it years ago, I think and this is downtown Toronto. First building that came to mind was the Scotia building downtown.
Yeah.
Because you see the big S on that brown building, and that's it. And that's what it reminded me of.
It totally makes sense. And isn't the Scotia building the one that's got gold in the windows or something?
Trying to remember, does it? Probably, but it stands out when you look at it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, besides CN Tower, that's the only building that stands out.
It's true. It's very true. Totally makes sense. And again, it proves that, like, inspiration is generally your surroundings, not as much things that you want it to be. It's what you see around you. So. Totally
and that's the thing with stories and stuff. And I remember this is. Again, this is Stan Lee saying this, and I remember Stan Lee was saying years ago I think it was Stan Lee and Roy Thomas were talking about this in an interview, and they were talking about Doctor Strange and how they had Doctor Strange, I think if I remember the story right, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Roy Thomas was saying the Doctor Strange's home, what's the name of it?
Sanctum Sanctorum or something, isn't it?
That's it, yes. It's based on one of his old apartments he lived on, I think if I remember, Bleecker Street in New York.
That's awesome. I wonder if he had that cool window.
I don't know that. I don't know if they showed but again, this is an interview from the early 80s and 90s, so I don't remember if they had photos or not, but they did. Thomas did say he based it on that, and that's where he lived, and some of the environments and stuff were what his neighborhood.
Makes total sense. I mean, it makes it easy. I mean, it's funny because everybody thinks that it's like, the challenge of it. And it's like sometimes the challenge is just like open your eyes when you're walking around, and there's all the environment you need. So.
Oh, that's it. Yes. And that's why I remember seeing Jack Kirby drawings, and when he's doing the shots of New York and stuff, and you're thinking, this is probably the neighborhood he lived in, because you could look when you see the food stands, you see everything. It's like I know he had a vivid imagination, but this is coming from his personal life. You could tell because he's walked past this food cart.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, people always say it's like imagination, just make it up, but it's like if you try too much to just make it up, it's not realistic. There's nothing realistic about it. And I feel like, because like with Blue Orchid, it takes place in Southeast Asia. And so I just reference everything off of I wander around with a camera or my cell phone all the time taking pictures and be like, ooh, that air conditioner is going to be in this one, or this storefront's going to be in this one, and stuff like that.
See, that's much easier. That's easier these days because now you have instantaneous, take a picture, use it as reference.
Yeah.
Going back to the 90s, you take that picture, get it developed, come back, and, a week later,
Yeah. Although in Toronto...
nowadays it's...
In Toronto it's a little easier because there's so many magazines and stuff about Toronto. And I remember, I think Tom used to clip a lot of pictures of, buildings from Toronto and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And had them as reference. And I'm sure you did the same where you see an article in Now magazine about, Queen West, and you'd be cutting out the pictures to save them as reference.
Oh, yeah. I used to buy tons of magazines and, kind of have my clip file.
Yeah. I still have mine somewhere.
I kept my magazines and, when you look through them, half of it's clipped out because you're using some of it as reference, some of it as collage.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly collage, that's a tough one. Because, reference you can at least look at and keep, but collage, it's gone forever.
So for Blue Orchid, what's your main setting?
So the main setting, there's two settings. There's two specific settings. There's the city and the countryside.
Yes, you have the village. Yes.
Yeah, so it's like where she's from. She's from the village, and the city is sort of generally where she fights the monsters. I specifically don't make it about any particular city in Southeast Asia. There's a whole bunch of sort of cities that are referenced in it, but I specifically don't make it a particular city. It's just the city in it because I just, I want it to be sort of open to an audience of everybody. So, if somebody's from Thailand, they're reading and they go, oh, I see bits of that, or Bangkok in there in the city, or, if it's, and same with the country, it's like I sort of base it on just a general village. And I think about the similarities because, in areas like Southeast Asia, there's a lot of division about, this country has this and this country does this better and all that. So I try to find the similarities.
And that's the problem of even when you mention if I based it with Toronto, is if you don't put the title Toronto in it or yours, then you're going to get, I hate to say it, someone saying, well, that street doesn't look like that. Where if you're vague about it and say could be Toronto, you could get away with it. So what do you call it? Artistic license.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Marvel goes for New York, I know, and I know Scott Pilgrim went for Toronto. Like it's the first page is like says Toronto and has a picture of the Honest Ed sign. So it's like, it's 100% Toronto. So it's like you definitely, it's brave to do that, but I feel like you're not alienating your audience, but you're making it very specific, like,
And especially someone who lives in that city will say, wait a minute, that building doesn't look like that, you know. Where, Gotham City, it's Chicago or New York, but, you can have a mixture, blend of both and get away with it.
Yeah. So I try and do that too, where I sort of blend, and I'm very vague. Like I said, the city doesn't even have a name. The language I use on the sign, I don't use English on the signs. I just use a scribbled language.
You never. I didn't even notice it. You didn't mention any cities or country.
Yeah, there's no language. There's no country. It's just called the city. And the only thing. I was gonna say the only thing that's particular about my things is if you read the books. The city is always in oranges and browns, and the countryside is always in blues and greens, color-wise.
I noticed that. I noticed the greens and blues, yes.
Yeah, so I specifically do that. Like, that's sort of a design choice. But as far as, like, figuring out where exactly it is, it's like, it could be anywhere.
But that's a brilliant idea to, split it up like that by color.
Yeah, it actually just makes it easier to color. And,
No, but storytelling wise, it's amazing because then you get that, the shift in storylines and saying, okay, now we're in the countryside. Without really telling people you're in the countryside, you could change the colors and change the mood and say, okay, we're, let's say, more happier place.
Yeah, the only problem is sometimes I have pages where she'll be traveling to the countryside in a page. And so I have to go from like orange to blue within the page. Like if you have a page flip, it's easy. But I have quite a few of transition pages where she's going from one place to another. And so that's always the challenge. It's like, what do I make orange and what do I make blue? Particularly if she's like flying on the way to home. It's like, how do I do that?
Wow, you actually put thought into this. Wow. I'm impressed, actually. That's great.
I do. Well, I'm particularly thinking about it now because I'm actually coloring issue 3 right now. So like that's forefront on my brain right now. So, but I don't think about it enough that when I'm writing it, I don't think, well, maybe if I just make sure it's a page flip, it's easy. I always seem to do it in the middle of a page. So it's like, great, this is going to be complicated.
No, but that worked because, we talked about this in previous episodes, coloring our books. I know personally I should put more thought into coloring, but I don't because I'm bad at coloring. So, it's one of those things where, I see it as a chore, and it's like, what, get it done, type of mindset.
I'll be honest, I'm bad at coloring too. And the only thing I did is I made the set of rules when I started, and now I just have a palette, and it's so easy. Yeah. Now I don't have to think about it. Now it's like, okay, well, she's this color, so I have a color for her blue on her suit and everything, and it's like, it's just the same color every single time. The buildings are the same color every single time. her hair is the same color every single time. So now it's just like I have a formula, and I just do it, and I don't have to think about it anymore. So I think everybody always describes the environment as being sort of the secondary character, but I also think that maybe the environment is also sometimes the best representation of the artist as well.
Oh, I agree.
Because they say that you draw yourself, in all of your characters, but I think you draw the place where you live in all of your environments.
And here's a question for you. When you're doing your environment and your setting, do you have the same characters in the background sometimes walking by?
I do a bit. I kind of go a little bit abstract with my background characters. I know one of the things I love about particularly your TikTok Tom drawings is you'll have like a character almost looking right at like Tom or like a background character that you're like, and you almost say to yourself, like, what's that guy's deal? So you have a bit of that sort of surreal sort of like attachment to your characters in the background. And so in some ways, like I almost feel like half the time I want to read their story too.
That would be a fun story to do one day.
Just like dude with the book bag that was looking over at Tom when he magically appeared in front of Stinky's box. What's the deal with him?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one or two stories I did have purposely people looking at them going, here's the logic, and I'm going to explain the story. When Chris and I were working at a art store on Yonge and College in central downtown Toronto, I remember one time we were, I was on the phone, when I was working, I was on the phone talking to one of the other stores in smaller cities. And all you hear, on the street is fire trucks going by. The lady on the other phone said, "Is everything okay?" I go, "Why?" She goes, "I hear fire trucks and ambulance and all that stuff." I go, "Yeah, that happens every day." So that's my type of thinking with the box and Stinky and Tom, where, anyone else who lives in the city just keeps walking by saying, "Hey, this guy with goggles, this guy who's standing at the box, I see him and he's fighting monsters." That happens every day. Where someone who's new would be staring out and go, "What the hell are these guys doing? Are we drug dealers? What are we doing? Are we up to something no good?"
Yeah. I actually, in issue 3 that I'm drawing right now, it's hinting on it. It's going to be a storyline that's going to come up better. But part of my idea is that the idea that the city doesn't, because Blue Orchid saves the city from monsters all the time. And after a while, the people are like, they'll see a big monster, they're like, okay, it's okay, she'll take care of it.
But see, that's the thing where, people living in the city will say as an everyday occurrence, think about people who live in New York City,
Yeah.
The stuff they go through, they're probably just, so accustomed to it, they don't care. Where, some person living in, let's say, Salt Lake City, if they went to New York, it would be like chaos.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, you've been to India. I've been to India.
Yeah.
New Delhi. It's like even if you're from a big city, you go to New Delhi, it's like a different experience.
New Delhi and Mumbai, it's
chaos.
I live in Toronto, and you lived in Toronto, and we lived in chaos. We had, we have people from outside of Toronto saying, you guys have crazy drivers, you have crazy this, you have crazy people here. Then when you go to Mumbai and you go, wow, our city's nice.
Yeah, it's quiet. It's quiet and quaint.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like I agree with that, and I think that's a big part of like the background characters in that, and that's part of the environment for sure. It's like, how would people actually feel? Like again, in Blue Orchid, it's the same city just getting assaulted by monsters all the time, and it's like eventually they're like, she'll take care of it.
And when I did stories. I'm in the process of finishing up. I scanned. Now I'm gonna do a side pitch for my next book. I'm scanning all my mini comics, and I have almost 800 pages finished. I'm doing the layout. I finished the layout on it, and as I'm going through the layout and stuff, I'm looking at the drawings and stuff like that, and I'm going, "You're right. A lot of the stories were set in the urban settings and stuff like that." And I've noticed I've been using similar background characters or certain characters in the background all the time. Yep. And sometimes they walk past the same coffee shop or clothing store or CD or stores, so it's a common setting.
Yeah, well, I mean, after a while, actually one of the problems you get with backgrounds, and this is, one of the negative things you could look at, is you start to get complacent and you start to do the same thing over and over again. So I have like certain air conditioner units that keep appearing again and again because I'm like, well, I got to put something in this wall. It's like air conditioner, or something like that, or like tin fence that's all got a hole in it and stuff like that. It's like I do have one of the problems you can get when you're doing your setting both with characters and with buildings is you start repeating yourself again and again.
And here's the thing, like to us living in the Western world, the air conditioner setting doesn't seem that odd. Where in an Asian country, you have an air conditioner or AC, it's like, wow, that's not every houses could afford one, and not every house has one. So when you see one, yes, it's unique.
Yeah, and it's definitely like but again, you got to look out by putting it over and over again. Eventually your comic books start to look like the backgrounds for old Spider-Man cartoons.
Same backgrounds. Wasn't it Spider-Man that used the same? No, what was it? Was it Robin Hood that they used the same backgrounds from one of the? Was it Spider-Man or somewhere else?
Both Spider-Man and Rocket Robin Hood would just keep using the same background. Like you'd see the same tree or building go
That's
by.
It. Yes.
10 times.
And I knew that as a teenager when I was watching it and going. Then I remember reading about it and going, "Oh yeah, they used the same background."
I mean, it's a cost-effective way of doing it, but
it works.
As a comic book artist, you want to try and avoid that as much as possible.
But the environment and the setting and everything works. I mean, best example I could give for a setting is, I mean, I know it's a TV show, but look at a TV show like Cheers.
Yeah.
That setting, and even if you show the outside of that bar, you still know that's Cheers and that's where people hang out and stuff. And sometimes they had people talking right at the entrance of the doorway outside. And it was still, you still knew what where you're at.
Yeah.
And
I know in TikTok, Tom, brick walls are always around.
Oh yeah.
Like that's a big thing, and that's a big thing about, like, again, Queen West in the 80s and 90s. There's a lot of brick walls.
And you know what, the brick walls is, that's where the artist in me have fun on it. And I have to give credit to Bill Sienkiewicz because his Moon Knight comics, he drew every single brick in a lot of those pages, and I'll put a reference on that. And I think that's where I got the inspiration from. Where it's like, yes, I see brick wall buildings. You could just have a flat wall building, cement building, but that's boring. When I looked at Sienkiewicz's work, he drew every single brick.
I have a way of cheating that's kind of works, and that every single wall I have has plaster on it, and there's a chunk of it that fell off. So I have a clump of bricks, but I don't have to do the entire thing. So there's a structure inside there, but I only it's plaster wall or something like that. So
now here's the funny part. Like if you look at some of the brick buildings I do draw, look at the top or the bottom. You realize at the top point where I'm getting frustrated and bored with it now, because the shapes change.
Eventually, it's like this surreal blob.
No, you do change it. You're going, wow, that one's bigger than the other one, and this one, and I realize that as I'm inking it, I'm going, you know what, get this done. Why am I doing 100 bricks on this one panel?
And then you're cursing Sienkiewicz.
Yeah.
Stupid guy inspired me to draw the damn bricks.
All the bricks and everything. No, but what we were saying about settings and stuff is lot of stories. The settings help. I mean, the main thing is you don't have to base it on Toronto, New York, or Mumbai or New Delhi or anything like that. I think once you have your own settings set up, people will recognize it, and people who are reading your books on a regular basis, oh yeah, that's this area where Blue Orchid's from, and it helps. And subconsciously, even if you don't mention it, if you keep repeating it, people will eventually realize it.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, and you have to make some things that are continuous, like style choices and everything have to be continuous to some degree. Like you can't have like a really weird Chinese building in the middle of something if it's not story related.
That's it. Yes.
Like you have to sort of keep it consistent. You have to think about it a little bit, but then once you sort of get into it, it's easier. Like once you and you know, choose an architect. If you're doing a comic book, choose an architectural style that interests you to draw.
Yes.
You know, that's the other thing too. Is like even if you decide not to do the place where you're living, at least choose something that you're like, okay, you know, I really love, you know, Japan. Tokyo is a really cool city, so look up buildings in Tokyo and start, you know, using them and copying their style. Like pick something because you're going to be drawing a lot of it. So
I just remember reading an interview with Jamie Hewlett of Tank Girl, and the interviewer asked him, going, "Why did you set it in the Australian desert?" And he goes, "I hate drawing buildings."
yeah,
You know,
that's totally fair.
But he's amazing at drawing tanks. You know, so you
Exactly.
know, yeah, I can't draw tanks. You know, and I'm hoping I'm good at drawing buildings, but you know, it's funny. It's just, you know, you choose your environment, you know, and you play with it, and it's what you do with the story. But again, it worked for Jamie Hewlett with Tank Girl.
Yep, and it's what drove the story. I mean, to some degree, it's like it ends up becoming the cool part of the story in the long run.
Yeah.
His hack became the cool thing of the story, so it totally works.
And also, one thing about the environment and the setting is, and again, this is this is going for a personal experience. Tom Yo and I did a Temptation story where we had the story starts off our main character Stinky on a street corner, what we mentioned earlier, with the box and the geek shop right beside it and everything. And I don't think TikTok Tom appeared until like 20 pages later. So you don't even need the main character or even most of those, you know, supporting characters. You can have the environment and whatever's around you tell the story.
And that's a good thing. It should always be there, even when your main character is there. It's this strong environment, strong character, and you've got a good story.
That's it. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I think we should end on that. That's like a positive note.
That's a great, yes. And if any of you watching this, if you have any set environments and story in your stories, please let us know.
For sure. It's we're interested to see if anybody took Jamie Hewlett's idea and
Underwater scene. So that way, no, but then you have to draw fishes and coral and all that stuff.
Desert's the best.
Desert or deep space?
True enough.
Yes. That's going to be our next book.